Hi everyone, I'm Michelle and welcome back to my meadow. Today I am answering your questions. Every question you've asked me about the Vego and Birdies raised garden beds and the environment we're growing in here. If you have any questions that I don't answer or any suggestions for other videos, please put them in the comments below. I'm also going to be putting this list of Q&A on my website at michelleinthemeadow.com. So anything you missed in the video, you'll be able to find over on the website. If you are new to my channel, we are growing in Northeast Florida in Zone 9A on a 1/4 acre suburban lot with this great view behind me here. And we basically have 300 days between the frost dates, but technically with some frost cover, I can grow all year long here. And if you like this video, please stop and give it a thumbs up. It helps YouTube know that I'm producing content you want. It helps me know I'm producing content you want. And if you want to see more of my content, then consider subscribing and clicking that little bell notification so you can know each time I produce a new video. A quick backstory here. I was trying to decide which bed would be right for me, and I couldn't find any videos anywhere comparing the two. So my wife suggested I go ahead and get one of each and make that video that I'd been looking for. And that's how it came to be a part of this series. It's been 150 days since I first planted these beds out, and this is my 5th installment of follow-ups showing you what's growing on with the beds. Now, you might think I don't have my camera set up correctly, but in fact, I'm on a gimbal, so my camera is level. There is just that much slope in my yard. And if you stay tuned to the end of the video, I'm going to share with you some of the mistakes I made and some of the things I wish I'd done differently. What garden beds do you have? I have a Birdies, which is on the left here next to the avocado tree. And it is the 8-in-1 garden bed. And on the right, I have the Vego extra tall 9-in-1 garden bed. And folks want to know, why did I want to get such a tall garden bed? It was going to be very expensive to fill. I'll tell you how I did that. But the reason that I wanted a tall garden bed is because of comfort, because of my growing conditions, and back in that dark spot in the woods is a creek, and it has been known to flow all the way up past where this log is you see here. I wanted to make sure that no matter the conditions, my garden would be up above any rising water situation. And then finally, simply the height. I'm a woman in my mid-50s, and I think these are going to last for 10 or 20 years. And so I wanted to have a comfortable way to garden waist high for years to come. And it seemed like a great investment. Some folks wanted to know why I specifically wanted a metal raised garden bed. Let's go take a look in another part of the garden. I'll show you why. Here I have a 3x8 cedar and metal garden bed that I had built locally for our garden. This bed, when I bought it, cost about $210, which was 2 years ago. And now, if I had to order the same bed again, would be $350 or more. And after just 2 years in the garden, because I didn't put any treatment on it, the wood is definitely faded. It's not cracking or anything, but it's just not as pretty as it was when I first brought it in and the cedar was lovely. So we wanted something that would continue to look good as well as work well in the garden. And this seemed like the right choice, especially after watching Mark at Self-Sufficient Me with a decade of experience with these corrugated metal raised beds. One viewer wrote in and said, "I don't know why you're touting these beds. We all know you got them for free." No, not true, at least not for this YouTuber. I paid for both of those beds because I wanted to know how they were going to perform in my yard, and now I'm sharing that with you. Since that first video though, I have received some thank you gifts both from Epic Gardening and from Vego. And whenever I make a video with those or other products that I've received for free, I will clearly tell you, I will mark the promotion tab in YouTube and you will know that I've gotten them for free. But it will not affect my honest, truthful opinion about the products. In fact, I've had a couple of people reach out and I let them know, if you want me to review your products, you have to be open to an honest review. And if you're not, please don't include me in your program. Do I have an affiliate code or a coupon code for you? Yes. After reviewing both beds, I applied and became an affiliate for both companies because they each have features and functions that I like in these products and other products that they offer. And what that means for you is if you click on one of the links that I share, I'll receive some compensation for a qualified purchase, which helps me to make more videos like this for you. Now, as for the coupon code, on the Epic Gardening website, you can use the code Meadow to receive 5% off any purchase of your Birdies beds. How much did I pay for these garden beds? Well, I purchased them in December 2021 and each of them was right at $301 delivered to my door with sales tax and the free shipping that they were offering. They do go head-to-head on pricing throughout the year, and so if pricing is important to you, then do check out both of the websites. But remember, on Epic Gardening, you can add a 5% coupon with using the code Meadow. On Vego, they offer various coupon codes on their site during different sales cycles. How long did it take me to assemble the raised garden beds? If I recall, each of them was about an hour 45. One of them was just a little shorter, but it was because of the experience that I had putting the first bed together. Now, if I'd had help or I wasn't dealing with a torn rotator cuff, it might have gone a little faster. How much sun do they get? They get about 10 hours or more in the summer and about 8 hours in the winter in this orientation. And they are in the northeast corner of my yard, with this bed, the Vego, being the eastmost and the Birdies bed being the westmost. From this angle, it's really hard to even tell the beds apart. Other people asked, what kind of metal are these beds made from? They are both made from some alu-zinc combination, and I will put links on my website so you can read in more detail about it. I never really had any doubt that the Birdies metal would hold up, frankly, because it's been tested for decades with other gardeners. But time will tell if the Vego holds up to the test, because they say they were designed to last for 20 years, but they haven't been on the market long enough to be able to substantiate that claim. It's all done through laboratory testing. Now, this next question has created some grief for some people, so if I misled you, I apologize. But people wanted to know about the bracing they saw me installing in the original installation video. The version of the beds that I purchased included bracing. The Vego bed had 4 braces with it and I used all 4. The Birdies bed had 2 braces with it and I used both of those. But not every version of the beds needs or includes the braces, but on both websites you can purchase those separately. I hope that settles that question once and for all. I'm sorry if I misled anyone. It certainly was not my intention. All I knew is the beds I purchased had bracing in them. Now, talking about those bracing, let me show you where the bracing is in the bed and why I think Vego has 4 of those and Birdies only has 2. Please remember though, I am not an engineer. This is a layperson's point of view on this topic. I'm sure we'll have some engineers weighing in on this, so feel free to add your comments below. This is the Vego bed, and you can see that there is a column of screws here and a column of screws here, but nothing right in the middle. So it would not make sense to use only 2 braces on this bed. These panels are narrow, and so I have the braces, if I recall, here and here and here and here, and they run through the bed and it helps hold it in. Since there's not a center point on the bed, it wouldn't make sense to put them on just one panel or the other. For relatively the same size bed, you can see the Birdies has 2 panels on the side instead of the 3. And so it does have a center point here. And so on the Birdies beds, we have a rod here and here. And you may be able to see that those are sticking out a little bit. That's another one of the mistakes that I made in putting the bed together. I did not make sure when we set it in the ground that the bed was expanded out and pressed out to the end of the bracing, but it doesn't seem to be hurting anything. Everything is going just fine with that. Another point of contention is how many screws are in here, because at some point Vego reduced the number of screws that they're using based on their engineering test. Birdies uses a screw in every rib, which means in this particular installation with all the panels I used all 100 screws to put this bed together. Vego has designed it so that there are screws in every other rib, like so. And in this configuration, it includes 72 screws to put the entire bed together. Another question related to the screw placement and the 2 beds is, am I worried about soil leaking out of the bed because there is not a screw in every rib? While I do see a little bit of gappage here because I don't have a screw in every rib, these panels overlap by about 2 inches. That width, combined with the narrow gaps that we're seeing, I think it makes it very unlikely that we would see any soil loss through those gaps. Another question is about the edging. If you watch the original video, I was leaning towards the Vego edging. I thought it looked better and was a little cooler with some of the metal components inside. And on the Birdies, I had some trouble because I didn't let it warm up and stretch out before I cut it. And so I ended up cutting it a little short for the garden bed. Well, now my tune has changed a little bit. Now I've learned a little bit more about the different edging. Birdies tells us that theirs is a UV stabilized edging that they have been testing for years. They used to have the metal pieces and they just didn't hold up as well. And what I can tell you, and it was a mistake I made, when I installed this cattle panel, I must have scraped it. So now I do have a little bit of rust showing through there. Now, some folks have suggested I put Rust-Oleum on that, but in all fairness to the bed, it's under normal conditions and things get scraped. So I want to see how long that will hold up with the rust and if it affects the rest of the edging here. I really am trying to give this a true test. The Birdies edging doesn't have any metal in it, but one of the problems that I had is that I did not let it shrink in the sun. This shrunk, and so when I cut it to the exact fit, it then no longer fit and it was kind of loose. I have fixed the looseness with a piece of flex tape that I simply wrapped over the top edge of the bed and then pressed the edging back on. This will be another one of those mistakes I tell you about at the end of the video. But the edging on both beds is holding up just fine, except for these 2 little problems that I have noted. Now, it's only been 5 months that they've been out here, and so maybe in a year or 2 we'll have a little more information about how this edging really holds up. After I showed the rust on my last video, another person wanted to know if I could buy replacement edging, and unfortunately I didn't see that currently available on either website, but maybe that's something they'll be able to do in the future, and I will pass that information along to both of the companies. Someone else wanted to know if you could expand the beds and make them longer. In fact, you can. I liked this style bed because I could configure it for the way I needed in the garden. But other people have done some really creative things. At Flicker Hill Homestead, they have put 4 of the Birdies beds end to end, and I'll make sure I include a link to their channel and to some of their videos. And they repurposed the corners to be tree surrounds in their garden. Birdies does not currently sell an expansion kit where you can buy only the panels. Vego, however, does sell expansion kits for some of their beds, but maybe not for all of them. You certainly could click on the link and check that out at their website if you want something longer than this. For me personally, at least in this configuration, I would not want the beds any longer because of the slope that I have going on in my garden. All right, now let's get down to some physical spec questions. Which bed is taller? The Vego is 32 inches tall. The Birdies is 30 inches tall. With my current configuration, the Vego has 22.75 square feet of growing area, and the Birdies has a 24.78 square feet of growing area, which means it has about 2 more square feet of growing. So depending on what kind of plants you're growing, if you think about square foot gardening, you could put 2 to 8 more plants in the Birdies bed in this configuration. Now let's talk about the overall volume. If I only filled it with soil, the Vego would take 2.25 cubic yards of soil, or if you were buying the soil in 1 cubic size bags, that's about 61 bags of soil. The Birdies would take 2.29 cubic yards of soil, which is about 62 bags of soil to fill it up. So in overall volume, the Birdies is a wee bit bigger, even though it's not quite as tall. You also wanted to know which bed had thicker metal in the panels. And after they were assembled, I brought my calipers out, and the Vego was about 1% thicker in measuring in millimeters on the caliper. But honestly, 1/100th millimeter is not a very big difference at all. And it could even be an operator error. Which bed was easier to assemble? Honestly, they were fairly equal. Birdie simply had a nut and a screw to deal with, and I found out after assembling, of course, that because of the ribbing on the back of the nut, I could have hand tightened them all and then come along and only had to press from one side because the ribbing on the back of the nut would have held the nut against the bedding to tighten it up. But I keep learning. The Vego had a screw, a washer, and a nut, and I found that harder to deal with. But in quantity, there were 72 sets on the Vego and 100 sets on the Birdie. So they were kind of neck and neck. It took me a little less time to do the Birdies, but I did it second and learned a lot of stuff in doing the Vego first. Are these beds bottomless? Yes, they are. I have them on what ultimately is a muddy and clay surface. So I did not put any kind of hardware cloth or gopher cloth or anything like that underneath them. But if you live in an area where you are prone to have things dig up and under your garden, you may want to take a look at adding some hardware cloth to the bottom of yours. Which takes me to the next question: how did I fill the beds? Once I set them down on the cardboard, I had a helper and we added old logs, other debris, mulch, and then leaves to fill them in. It's about 2/3 of the way filled up like that. One big mistake that I made was rushing through the filling. I should have been more deliberate in packing the mulch in around the logs before adding the next layer. In the new beds, the soil settled faster than I expected. When I first planted this bed, it was completely filled to the top with soil, and I knew there would be some settling, but if I had to estimate, it has settled about 7 inches now in the 5 months time that it's been here. So the next time I set up a bed like this, I will be sure to add the mulch in the gaps before I add more layers of logs to make sure that we are filling it in as fully as possible so I can maximize the benefit of the high quality soil that I paid for in order to fill the top 12 inches of the bed. How much did it cost me to fill these beds up? Initially, I added about a yard of soil to each of the beds. For this round, I had purchased my soil in bulk. I usually have it delivered 4 yards at a time, and it's about $55 a yard when I have it delivered that way. That price was from 2 years ago, so I don't know what it might be now. But I also had the expense of labor to help me fill the beds, and I even hired a tractor to help finish topping off the soil because I just wasn't able to do it with my rotator cuff. So those are expenses you wouldn't have, but I just want to be transparent with what it actually cost me. I planned for a 12-inch soil depth. I felt like that would be sufficient for the kinds of things I was planting in the bed. You may have to consider what you want to plant to determine what's right for you. I did go do a little research online to figure out what it would cost me now to fill these beds up. For the Kellogg all-natural soil that they have available at Home Depot, it would cost about $110 per bed to fill it up with a high-quality soil. Now that's not all the way full. That's topping off that top yard or so with the bag soil and the rest being filled in with logs, leaves, and yard debris. And in the description of the video, I'm also going to include a link to ways that you can calculate the kind of soil you need depending on what size bed you have. So where did I get all those logs? My friends, it pays to know the tree people. So we had some tree work done here in our yard, and then our neighbor had some tree work done. And so I was able to save logs from both projects, knowing that I was going to have more raised garden beds around here. I also am very willing to source from around the neighborhood. So if I see someone with leaves, in fact, a lot of the leaves from this were a neighbor's leaves. I drove my truck down there, loaded up the back of my truck with the bags of leaves, and they actually got a double life. In the winter, they protected the bananas, and then once it was past our normal freeze dates, I took the leaves off of the bananas and I used them as fill in these beds, so that worked out. I know some people don't want to go get things off the curb. It doesn't bother me at all. Now, let me share with you some of the things that I thought went right and that I would do differently next time. The first thing I'm really excited about was lifting it up off the ground. I owe thanks to James Prigioni for that suggestion. I saw him do it in one of his videos and I thought that's pretty smart and a lot easier than getting up and down off of the ground in order to put the panels together. 2, I used power tools to make it a bit easier. 3, when I put the beds together, I only peeled the plastic back far enough to allow me to put the screws in. The instructions tell you to fully peel it back, but for me, because I was working on a concrete surface, I didn't want to scratch any of the panels, and so I just pulled it back partially. And then once the bed was assembled, it was really easy for me to peel that film right off of the beds. The other thing I'm really happy was my decision on the width of the beds. I did a lot of configuration and a lot of thinking about that before I put the beds together as to which way I would want to have them, and they are perfect. The list of what I did right is shorter than the things I would do differently, so that's what happens as gardeners. We just keep learning. Number 1, I would have had help just to flip the beds over so I could easily put screws in the bottom row or the bottom 2 rows. In these tall beds, or extra tall beds as they're called, I found it difficult even at 5'7" to reach all the way over and down to the bottom. Number 2, I would have leveled the beds better before filling them. I'm not sure that I could have leveled them on the slope part, but I could have leveled them on the narrow edge a little better than I did. Number 3, I would have added the landscape fabric before I filled the beds so I could have easily tucked it underneath the edge. I simply wanted to keep weeds from coming up around the edges of the bed so I wouldn't have to get up to it with a whippersnipper or a weed eater, and I would have fewer weeds to pull. Number 4, I would have been more careful putting in the cattle panel. I didn't expect it to scratch. The Birdies didn't scratch when I did it, but the Birdies, if it did scratch, doesn't have metal inside. So, these are things that we keep learning and I'm sharing with you. Number 5, I would have left the edging in the sun for a few days, maybe even a week or more, and I'll do that next time before I put the edging on the bed, because I would want it to acclimate to the heat. It also would probably make it easier to work with. Number 6, and this is also on the edging, I stretched my edging around which was probably a mistake. Instead, I should have contracted it as I was putting it on to make sure that I was prepared for it to expand and contract as the temperatures change. There is a video from Geeky Gardens. Thank you, Geeky Gardens, for making that video that he shared, and I'll make sure I put a link to that in the description below. You should go and check out his channel as well. He's doing some fun stuff with possums, raccoons, turtles, and of course, a whole bunch of raised garden beds. Number 7, we're back to this edging again. I'm sensing a theme, is I would not have put the edging on the bed until it was completely filled. And so you think the edging really is there for safety. The top of these beds aren't sharp. And I think if I had waited until the beds were completely filled, then I also would have had a better shot at getting proper sizing for the edging. Now you may wonder, why does the edging have to be fit? Remember, these beds are designed to work in different configurations. So they send you enough edging to fit no matter what way you decide to set up the bed. That's good, right? Number 8. Now I did my assembly on the patio, and even though the weather was cool, it was not shady. I will probably, the next time I do this, set up a table, set up some sawhorses out in the meadow in a shadier area, or if I do it on the patio again, then I will use some sort of a drop cloth. Thank you to one of the viewers for making that suggestion, because that way I wouldn't have to worry about scratching up any of the panels. And then finally, number 9, the 9th thing I would have done differently, is I would have double checked and made sure that the bed panels were pressed out fully to the width of the bracing before I filled the beds. And again, that was just me having a helper, us trying to go fast and get things done. But the next time I'll make sure on the beds that have bracing that we expand the sides to reach the sides of the bracing. Now, a few of you have asked other questions that aren't necessarily related to the beds, and I wanted to cover them here as well. How did I make this trellis? This is a 16-foot cattle panel from Tractor Supply, and we had it curved around the bananas as fencing. Once we no longer needed it there, I dragged it across the yard and I pinched the bottoms together, and I actually used a rope to hold them in until I had the arch shape that you see here. Once I had the arch shape, I dragged it to the edge of the bed, and honestly, I just tilted it up. And I showed this in the other videos, but in doing so, they're just connected and leaning against the bed. And I can see that it is putting some pressure on the metal of the beds on both sides. I can see some more rust there. I didn't notice that before. So that's definitely then from me scratching this against there, because it's right next to that. So next time, if I did something like this again, I would probably put in one T-post in the middle just to keep the pressure off of the beds. But that's how I made it. I just bent it over and tilted it up, and I'm not using any screws or anything to connect it. It is all gravity and friction. In other videos, I had some hoops and nettings. These are the hoops still here that I put on for a different reason, and people wanted to know where I got those. Those came from Amazon, but I will tell you that even though the hoops themselves have done well, and many of these have been out in the yard for almost a year, I was very disappointed that I lost a few critters and almost lost some other critters in the netting because of the size of the netting. And so next time I am looking for something different. And what I discovered is that Vego actually offers a trellis, netting, and frost kit. And Birdies has a trellis kit where you add your own piping. And so I think next season I'll be giving those a test. I'm sure you guys would like me to make a video. Let me know in the comments if y'all would like me to make a video about that. And I talked about it already, but people want to know what this landscape fabric is. I also purchased this from Amazon. I buy it by the bulk on a roll, and I have been using this brand for several years, and I haven't had any yet that I have had to throw away because it was failing. I have had to replace some because of the way I cut some things and I needed longer pieces, but I'll put a link in the description. Some folks wanted to know what amendments I used in this bed. The first time I used some mycorrhizal amendments, but nothing else. And I didn't add any fertilization for more than a month after the plants were planted. But I am working on creating my own amendments, creating my own fertilizer here on the property through compost, through comfrey, through weed tea, through worm castings. I want to make all of that my own, so I'm not relying on outside inputs to make things better. But when I choose a fertilizer, I am currently using the Espoma Organic series of fertilizer, and I use that whenever it's possible as opposed to a non-organic solution. What is this mulch, and is it affecting plant growth? Well, this is a pine and aspen blend, but I am now going to just a pine blend because of the pricing. I originally bought 8 cubic feet on Amazon, 4 of aspen and 4 of the pine, and those 8 cubic feet together cost me $53 and now would be $73. But thanks to someone who watches the channel, thank you very much, they said if I'm gonna get pine, why not just use the pine from Tractor Supply? Boy howdy, Tractor Supply, 8 cubic feet of the pine litter, and I buy the flakes, the bigger pieces, $8. Now, over time, is it possible that this pine could break down and make the soil more acidic? It's possible. And I'll keep track of that and see if my plants are affected. But as of right now, the plants are just really happy having a thick mulch. And the reason that I picked that over straw is while I was dealing with my shoulder surgery and being in a sling, I just could not drag around big bales of straw. And honestly, the last time I got straw, it was terribly seedy, leaving my garden very weedy. Sorry, I just couldn't help myself. Now, this next bit of information I think is important for you to know so you can make the decision that is right for you. The Birdies bed is made in Australia, and I purchased it through their U.S. distributor, Epic Gardening, which is a U.S. company. The Vego bed is made in China, and I purchased it through the Vego website, which shows their address as Houston, Texas. So where I bought it is based in the USA. I don't share this to be political or controversial or anything. I just think people want to know where their goods are made, and you make those choices for yourself. Which bed do I like better? Personally, dollar for dollar, I'm going to have more growing room in the Birdies in this configuration. So for another bed like this, I'd probably go with the Birdies. That said, Vego has some cool styles and options that Birdies just doesn't offer, including a rolling dragon fruit planter that I've kind of got my eye on. So it really is going to come down to the use that I have for it, the placement I want, and the budget I've prepared. And so for me, they are still neck and neck. As often as I can, I do buy American. I am working on retooling my toolbox with American tools. When possible, I outfit my garden supplies with American-made tools. And just as soon as I can, I'll have some American-made garden beds here too. Maybe one day someone will make a bed that looks like these in America as well. Until next time, my friends, remember to wear a high-quality sunscreen and drink plenty of water. Thanks for watching and have a fantastic day.